Welcome to Medicine, Motherhood, and Missions, the podcast where we dive deep into impactful and inspiring conversations with amazing professionals who've turned their challenges into stepping stones for success. I'm Johanna, your host, and each time we meet, we'll explore the stories and journeys of remarkable individuals who are PAs, doctors, professionals, mothers, and mission-driven changemakers, from the halls of the hospitals to the hearts of our homes, and into the communities we serve. Join us as we uncover the challenges, triumphs, and everything in between, and see life through each other's perspective. If you're seeking fulfillment in your career and life, I've got something special for you too. Download our free guide on how to be a fulfilled provider. It's packed with tips and insights to help you thrive while balancing the many hats you wear. And for all those parents out there dreaming big while raising little ones, check out Little Evie's Big Dreams children's book series, available now on Amazon. These heartwarming stories inspire kids to chase their own dreams, just like you're chasing yours. So grab your favorite cup of coffee or tea, settle in, and get ready for uplifting conversations that will leave you inspired and equipped to make a greater impact. Let's jump in. Hello, friends. Welcome back to Medicine, Motherhood, and Missions, the podcast where we dive deep into the places where purpose, healing, and calling intersect. Today's guest is someone who has worn many hats, from journalist, trauma nurse, infertility expert, business founder, and bioethicist. Mary Fusillo, she sent me a bio, and all it said was mother, career changer, entrepreneur, wife, and volunteer. But she is so much more. She's risen through the ranks of administration and leadership. She was instrumental in starting the donor egg program. And Mary has been a leader in the field of reproductive medicine for over 30 plus years and has started 3 companies of her own. And walking through her own fertility journey, Mary launched her own donor egg and surrogacy programs, national consulting offers and efforts, multiple companies. But what makes this conversation so compelling isn't just Mary's professional accomplishments, it's her willingness to wrestle with those hard, ethical questions. How old is it to have a baby? What does justice mean? So as we enter this conversation, we're going to hear so many different perspectives in bioethics, and I'm so excited to start this. Thank you so much, Mary, for coming on the show, and I'm excited to speak with you today.
Well, thank you for having me. I sounded really wonderful. I'm like, who is she talking about?
I know.
I was like, wow, she's accomplished.
It's very impressive what you have been doing in your career thus far, and especially in the bioethics arena. And how you've kind of incorporated that into all of your companies and endeavors so far. But let's start off with, you began your career in journalism before pivoting into nursing, public health, and eventually reproductive medicine. What led you to make those specific shifts? And how did becoming a mother influence your path?
Well, one of the things is I have a 27-year-old daughter who is her and her twin brother are part of the reason why I'm in the field I am now. But what really started off is when I went to college, my parents, now I went to college a long time ago. And seriously, back then, even if you were bright and everything, you really had a very narrow career path. My friends were majoring in art history. And they weren't majoring in business or accounting or whatever. And I was at the University of Texas, but my parents really felt that I should go to nursing school, but I didn't want to. And so I finally rebelled my junior year and switched my major to journalism and public relations. And so I got out of school, and it took me a few months to find a job, but I actually found a job in San Francisco, working on the newspaper there. And I thought it was going to be like, I was going to be like this fabulous journalist, writing these Pulitzer Prize winning articles. And I was actually the assistant to the society editor. Yeah, that was a big journalism job. And, but actually The fun side of that, it was fun. It was fun. I went to all these parties. I had 5 black dresses that I wore in rotation. And every night we went out and I would stand there with my notebook and I'd write, oh, Johanna is wearing a beautiful Oscar de la Renta in navy. Okay. And then I would go back and type up these notes and then she would write the society column. It was
Right.
fun, but
Yeah.
I made no money and it wasn't what I wanted. Okay. I
Yeah.
mean, I was paid pittance because that's what journalists make.
Hmm.
So I did that. I moved into more of after a couple of years, I went and worked in public relations for a while because it paid incrementally more. And I
Hmm.
actually worked at a company that did PR for resorts, which sounds, oh my gosh, how fun is that? No, I was the person who like smoothed the waters after the toilet overflowed on your honeymoon night. Okay. It was not exactly cutting edge. Okay. So
Yeah.
after kind of some soul searching, I said, maybe I'll go back and go to nursing school because at least it's a job that pays better. And that's how I got into
Hmm.
nursing. So at 30 years old, I became a nurse.
Hmm.
And I thought, well, I don't have time to mess around. And so I kind of climbed the ladder in a hurry. And after 8 years as a nurse and a couple more degrees, I became the director of critical care at a medical center hospital in
Hmm.
Houston, Texas. And I met my husband, got married, and we had children through in vitro fertilization. And that changed
Hmm.
my perspective. So I found
Hmm.
out that I really want to do that. And I spent time trying to get a job in there. And
Hmm.
I volunteered in fertility related businesses. I
Yeah.
made sure that all of the physicians in the field in my town knew that I was looking for a position. And I
Hmm.
just so happened to have one that turned out to be, they were looking for a manager and I had all that management experience. So I
Hmm.
started in 1999 actually working in the field. So this is my
Yeah.
26th year in the field. I've worked for 2 large IVF clinics as the manager or the nurse manager, whatever you want to call it. I did 3 years of consulting. And then because my kids were like 8 years old, I decided it was time for me to like stick a little closer to home versus
Hmm.
jaunting around the country. And
Yeah.
so I started my own business in 2007.
Okay. Yeah. So parents are always right, right?
Well, I mean, I will say this,
I'm just
yeah,
joking.
really,
Yeah,
okay.
I
I
know.
will say
I'm
this.
just joking.
And I'm at the tail end of that part of my career. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I will say I was not a born nurse. I was
Yeah.
very, very good at it. I
Uh-huh.
did not live and breathe it. And I think it was
Right.
best that I got out when I did,
Uh-huh.
and went into fertility, which I was passionate
Mhm.
about.
Yeah, and it's interesting also, that you kind of I think, 27 years ago and all, that's when IVF started to become a little bit more in mainstream. And so you were kind of at a junction. You got in at a junction when it was really kind of becoming more common, a little bit more mainstream, and people are having a little bit more access to it, right?
I would think that the stigma started to go away then.
Yeah.
And so I did IVF in 1997.
Mhm.
And there was still stigma. I was so excited because it's like I was
Mhm.
going to have a baby. So I like told everybody, right? Oh, I'm doing
Yeah.
IVF. People were like, oh, they kind of had it was
Mhm.
very much a judgy kind of atmosphere. I know it's
Uh-huh.
hard to believe that now when it's like everybody does IVF, but at the
Mhm.
time and it was expensive.
Mhm.
It didn't work like it does now. I was very fortunate it worked the first time. I got boy
Right.
girl twins. I hit the jackpot.
Yeah.
But I really felt that the stigma needed to go away and we needed to
Mhm.
make it more mainstream. And especially as I got into the field and I got more
Mhm.
involved with third party, which is a huge part of infertility, which is donor egg,
Mhm.
surrogacy, donor sperm, and even embryo donation. So that's
Mhm.
all called third party parenting because there's a third party within so there's a
Mhm.
mother, a father, and a donor, a mother, a father, and a surrogate. So that's
Right.
kind of where that came from. And I found
Mhm.
out that that was easy. And the way to take the stigma away was to
Mhm.
completely not say, make it normalized. Oh,
Yeah.
well, come on in there. We're going to look at the donors now. And are you excited? Excited about being a mom? And so
Yeah.
instead of making it hush hush in a back room, I wanted to make
Mhm.
it mainstream.
Yeah, yeah. That's very true. And I think still there is some stigma out there, because even people going through IVF still have those ideas of, is it the right thing to do? Which we'll get into a little bit later too. But Yeah, but I can imagine 27 years ago, it was even more. I think with any change, with anything, um, it's always hard at first when things start. But of course, this is a huge bioethical kind of question and dilemma that comes into play that makes it even harder to advance in science and reproductive health in a way, because we're talking about so many ethical questions. It's not just like a cancer treatment, which we're like, yeah, we definitely need to do that. We need to put more money into it. We got to have insurance coverage for it.
Right.
This is something where ethics come into play, which makes it harder, right?
I think the ethical issue, actually, when I was writing my thesis, my advisor, I kept changing advisors. They kept leaving. I hope it wasn't me, but and so my last advisor was and I was at the end, so it's like I didn't have a couple year experience with him. It was like I was there at the writing the thesis part, and
Mhm,
so I sent in my thing I was going to do. This is what I want to do, and he wrote
mhm,
back, "Don't you think it would be a good idea to study the ethics of IVF?" And I was
mhm,
like, dude, that ship has sailed. Okay. I mean,
uh-huh,
the guy wasn't even born, when IVF started. I mean, the guy was like 33. And he's like, I don't understand. I said, there's 8 million people that are born from in vitro fertilization. So I think that like looking at the ethics of it is no. Let's
mhm,
look at other ethics with like age and single people and when social surrogacy. Let's look at those ethical
mhm,
issues versus, oh, should we or should we not do IVF?
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely true, since that is something people are doing. Um, but in regarding to the formally studying those bioethics at your in your during your career, what questions about like dignity in death, justice in birth, or what were those ethical questions that you found also that were intriguing in
Well, I would say, well, first of all, I ended up writing my thesis on posthumous reproduction, which is such a interesting subject. People are like,
uh-huh,
what? And basically, that was intriguing because it's not something that's very mainstream.
mhm,
Excuse me. And but there is a lot of literature, and people have a lot of opinions on it. So my paper was that I ended up writing and looked at the ethics of how it happens now and how it should happen. So I gave a recipe to make it better because it does happen. People are asking all the time when their loved one passes away, like their
mhm.
child or their spouse or whatever. I still want a
Yeah,
baby with this person. Where
mhm,
I'm only talking about male because right now
mhm,
they don't really have the capability of doing it with a woman.
right,
So usually it's somebody who had a terrible accident that caused brain death. And so while they may be an organ donor, they're also going to retrieve their gametes. The
mhm,
problem is that they haven't pre-authorized that, then
mhm,
that's the ethical dilemma. So I
yeah,
addressed that in my paper, um,
yeah,
which is a fun, intriguing subject. But in reality, the more everyday subjects are how old is too old? Should people
mhm,
in their 60s be able to use a surrogate and an egg donor to have a baby? Um, should a single man that's 55 should he be able to have a baby with an egg donor or surrogate? Should social surrogacy be there? You don't have a
mhm,
physical reason why you can't carry a pregnancy. You just don't want to be pregnant. May it be vanity. It may be you have issues scared around the whole process. So those are the kind of issues that come up in this.
mhm,
Um, so, or like having three surrogates at the same time so that you could have all your children at once. It's those kind of things. Those
mhm,
those are the ones that wake me up in the middle of the night. Like, do I want to
yeah,
be a part of this?
mhm. Yeah, and speaking to your theses on posthumous
Posthumous reproduction. I know.
posthumous
Ah.
reproductions. So that there was an actually recent news, or I think a lady out of Spain, the son had passed, and so she was wanting his legacy to continue, or her family future. So I think
Mhm.
she carried a baby using her son's sperm or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
As I can't remember the exact details, but yeah, that's kind of along the lines of your
Yeah.
work.
So, the one that, when you get really deep into posthumous reproduction, it's just not about
Uh-huh.
making the embryo and putting it in a carrier. The thing that just happened in Georgia over the last couple
Mhm.
of months, where the woman ended up having a brain bleed at
Oh, yeah.
9 weeks pregnant.
Mhm.
They
Yeah.
decided they couldn't turn off the ventilator, even though she was technically dead,
Mhm.
because she was
Yeah.
pregnant and the abortion laws or whatever.
Mhm.
And so that
Yeah.
was one where, in other countries, for instance, in Germany, if the
Mhm.
same thing had happened in Germany, they would have turned off the ventilator. They
Mhm.
do not allow that. So
Yeah.
even if you are 22
Mhm.
weeks pregnant and you end up brain dead, they're still turning off the ventilator. And that
Yeah.
their reason is they don't believe in it. They don't believe that, because they believe that the brain death, you're dead, and that you can't be born
Mhm.
after someone is dead. Now,
Yeah.
in that case, it was a tragedy, because
Mhm.
the parents and the father of the baby had no, so justice was not served. They did
Yeah.
not follow the wishes of her
Yeah.
or her family.
Yeah. That's a huge ethical case because I mean, where do we draw the line? Um, and they had a picture which kind of broke my heart is of their 8-year-old, I believe,
Yeah,
son holding onto his mom who had been dead for brain dead for so
months,
many months. And
right?
he's there stroking her hand. It was a video, I think,
Yep,
stroking her hand. She's on, ventilator. She's,
on all these drugs.
not aware. And he can't let go and he can't say goodbye yet, you
Yeah,
know? And to have to live with that at that young age. And then the baby was also born
very
very
premature.
premature. And, where is the ethics in that? Is it really ethical to, be so physically draw the line on we don't want an abortion, so to speak,
Don't get me
where,
started.
and so,
So
and
what
I don't want
happens?
to, open a can of
Yeah,
worms,
not
but,
over that can of worms
but
today.
it's just
Yeah,
at least to talk about that. I mean, just to say that where is the ethical line in that? Versus, that lady who carried the son's genetics to continue
I mean, I
legacy.
get it, but I don't get it. I
Uh-huh.
get it, and that's
Hmm.
why I think I'm not somebody who believes that there should be hard and fast rules in
Hmm.
reproduction. Okay, I think that you
Hmm.
should look at all of the players. So a lot of times in my field, for instance, we do a lot with egg donors, and
Hmm.
it used to be back in the day, no one ever told. It was like the old days of adoption, and adoption and egg donation are nowhere. They're not the same. Okay,
Hmm.
and egg donation, someone willingly gives you a piece of their DNA, but you build the baby. You make the baby inside you.
Hmm.
She's not giving away anything. She has, 400,000 more eggs. When somebody
Hmm.
does adoption, they are relinquishing the child that they grew to you to raise. So they're different. But one of
Hmm.
the old things about adoption is that it was all closed and no one ever knew.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so with egg donation, it's been that way. But over the last 25 years or so, it's really changed to the point where people want to know who the egg donor was. They want to
Yeah.
know, can they ever talk to her? Can their
Hmm.
children get to know her? That kind of stuff. But the
Hmm.
pendulum has also swung to the direction where she's not part of the family. She gave an
Hmm.
egg. She didn't
Yeah.
grow the baby. She didn't raise the baby. She didn't pay for college. And so
Yeah.
we have to be careful with egg donation, how the pendulum swings in
Yeah.
in that case. So, I feel that egg donors have a lot of autonomy, which is what it's about.
Hmm.
They can decide who they want to donate to. They can decide how much compensation they want. They can decide if they want a relationship. So I don't
Hmm.
feel that they've lost their autonomy. They actually have all the cards.
Hmm.
They get
Yeah.
to decide.
Yeah, they do. And so j- just a quick going back to that other topic, I feel like sometimes we can try to make a statement about things and prove how bad things are, but do it in such a bad way. I feel like sometimes, people get used as examples about how horrific laws can be, and that can be so detrimental to those families involved, right?
On that
Anyway,
case, I agree with you
yeah,
because I think that this is like you could do a whole ethics course on just that case and have
yeah,
material and material because
hmm,
there's the ethics of, okay, so who's paying the bill? Okay,
yeah,
so she's declared dead,
hmm,
okay, which means her insurance stops because she was employed as a nurse and so she had insurance. So who's paying
hmm,
that bill until they declared
yeah,
her physically? Is it
yeah,
going to go to her family? Is the
hmm,
hospital going to eat it? Is the state going to pay for it? Who's
yeah,
caring for this baby in the
hmm,
NICU? Who's paying for that? There's so many
yeah,
factors that go
hmm,
into this, but everyone is over here screaming about the baby, the baby, the baby. So now maybe you've brought a baby into the world that's going to have lifelong challenges,
yeah,
physical, mental, and then
emotional because
emotional, the whole
yeah,
bucket.
it's like,
What
yeah,
about? I
yeah,
mean, really?
yeah, exactly. And, that is such a tremendously horrific, part of bioethics, healthcare issues that we face. And I know in our pre conversation, we were talking about dignity and death and
Hmm.
hospice care and a lot of different other healthcare related ethical issues that we can easily come across and talk about. And, even in this, egg donor surrogacy, um, talking about these types of examples, I feel like it's interesting how, the egg donor has so much autonomy, but then is it also a benevolent action from the egg donor, or is it like the surrogacy too? Is it a benevolent action, or is it more of a compensation that motivates them?
I just so happened to do a study on that. Okay. And so it was an old study. I did it a long time ago. And
Mhm,
so what I did is this is when I worked in consulting and I actually called on IVF clinics. So how I set it up was I went and they had, this is back, this is like 20 years ago. And I
mhm,
had a survey in an envelope. Okay. And the
uh-huh,
envelope was addressed to a PO box I had. And so we gave them to the staff, like about 15, 18 clinics got 5 of them. And we said to randomly pass them out to an egg donor after she had donated. And
mhm,
you know what? All of them came back. I mean, and so what we did is we'd
yeah,
ask like 8 questions, and they were supposed to do it before they left the IVF clinic after they donated. So they finished recovery and they were
mhm,
drinking their little Coke, and then they were supposed to ask. So we asked them what region of the country. We didn't want the name of the clinic, but just are you north, south, east, west? How old they were, how much compensation they had, and what were they going to use the compensation for. And I did the study twice, a couple years apart. Same questions, same methodology. And
okay,
I found out that when I first did it,
mhm,
donors were making about $2,500 to $3,000 compensation. Okay.
mhm,
And they were all going to use it for spring break in Cancun, a designer purse. I'm going to make an extra payment on my car. They were all doing that. Flash forward a couple years,
mhm,
same thing, but they were using the compensation. Now the compensation had gone to $5,000 to $10,000. They were using it for, I'm going to pay down my student loans. I'm going to put it in my savings account for my house I'm going to buy. I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to pay for my kids' preschool this year. And what I found the most interesting is when the people were doing it for the trip to Cancun,
mhm,
their number one reason for being a donor was compensation. When they
mhm.
were doing it and they were making 10,000 and they were going to be able to put a down payment on a condo. I know this was 20 years ago, so okay. You can't put a down payment on a condo
Yeah.
for $20,000 a day. But so they would say that they did it because they wanted to they wanted to help someone have a family. B, they wanted to make sure that their genes made it out into the world. And then finally, third was compensation. And it was so bizarre. I actually won a paper at the big ASRM meeting, a prize paper. But and I got to give a talk in Europe on the paper. So hey, it got me a lot of travel. But I was kind of shocked when I did and it was a very simple
Yeah.
research subject. And
Uh-huh.
I wondered if the fact that they were getting compensated more influenced them to say, oh, I want to help people. But I
Mhm.
really didn't see, there wasn't that much bias. It was like almost uniformly, they all said they wanted to help somebody. We ask them all when they apply now, and their number one reason is that they love the thought of helping somebody, but they also like the thought that they help somebody and they get paid.
Mhm.
So it's and I don't. I don't really think that there's anything wrong with being compensated. We all get out of bed every day and go to a job and get compensated for it. So it's a job.
Do you think that, because when you initially did the survey, versus years later doing the survey, do you think the factors surrounding IVF and fertility, those changes in the field impacted their view, that they were able to see that it was more of a, helping others be able to have a family, versus before, when it was still kind of stigma, etc., then it was just kind of like, well, I'll just get some money for it.
100%. And the reason I feel that way is because, granted, the second survey was done at the kind of the advent of social media. Okay, so the second survey was done like 2008, 2009, something more that. So they were just starting to have social media. So hence, we have a social media page for each of the companies, and we would have all the donors would join it. They didn't care if people knew who they were. They were actually, we did a referral bonus. They refer their friends. Their roommate in college would take them to the retrieval. And before that, I remember we used to pay for a companion service, because if the donor was in New York City and we'd ask them, they have to have a companion to take them home. Just like anytime you have surgery, you gotta have somebody take you home. And so none of them would bring anybody. They were like not telling anybody. And so we would have to pay for a companion service to pick them up at the clinic and take them to the hotel and let them rest or whatever. And then now it's all like, oh yeah, I'm bringing my friend. We have a free trip to New York. And it's a whole different mindset. I mean, they tell people, they tell their mothers. They used to not do that. We would get the pushback we got years ago was from, well, my boyfriend doesn't want me to have other children out. Or my mother said that would break her heart if she had grandchildren she didn't know about. But our education is so deep now, and it always was, but now they listen more about the fact that this is not your mother's grandchild. This is another woman's grandchild. Because you've just given some DNA, you haven't given a baby.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And even that is, an ethical question. You're right. It's like, are we giving part of our genetics and part of our life, to someone else? And do we have any influence in that life after donating it, right?
Well, one of the interesting things I think, and I don't have the numbers exactly right, but right after the newest Pope was kind of, the American Pope, Pope Leo or whatever, somebody did this whole thing, this genealogy, and so they looked back and said that, okay, so they went back 400 years, and he had 34,000 ancestors. Okay, and so I went online. My grandmother was actually a professional genealogist that did this. So I'm like, oh, let me look that up. So I looked it up. It is true. If you go back, and everybody has 2 grandparents and 4 great grandparents and 8 and 60, when you do it arithmetically and you go back that many generations, yes, you do have 34,000. So at the end of the day, we're all pretty much each other. I mean, seriously. I mean, it's like, it's not just when you think about things like 23andMe, or ancestry.com, and you end up with all these ancestors, but very few people actually do that. So you think,
yeah, exactly. And because with adoption, you're either the person giving the child towards adoption, versus giving an egg. Like, what was your thoughts as you studied that, giving the actual child the life that was formed, and, at very, whatever age they were, adopted at, versus.
Well, I don't equate the two, donation and adoption. I think that adoption and don't, I mean, giving up a child for adoption, which actually is the wrong words. It's like you're placing a child for adoption. Let me be politically correct here.
Yeah.
I think it's the most courageous act of love you can have. Okay. On the other hand, being an egg donor is like, that's kind of a fun thing. I think I want to do that. I want to help somebody else. And then it's over. It's not a lifetime commitment. I've asked donors, actually, in my podcast, I interviewed some donors that have been veteran donors with us. So we know them really well. They're like our daughters practically. And they both ended up saying, Yeah, I wouldn't consider myself a mother. I'm just a genetic contributor. Do you ever think about it?
Hmm.
No, maybe occasionally, but they seem
Yeah.
very much like they were okay with it. They had children themselves,
Hmm.
and they didn't think that they had other children out there. And
Right.
so that's just an N of two.
Uh-huh.
But we find that same thought process. So I look at adoption
Hmm.
and egg donation is completely different. I think it depends on when I ask donors, hey, we need your grandparents, your great grandparents, your aunts and uncles, and they come back and go, "Blah, blah, blah, blah." I don't know, because people don't have the same close knit families that they did even
Mm.
50 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
So you can have a donor who literally never met her grandparents. The
Hmm.
grandparents lived in Seattle. They lived in South Florida. The parents
Hmm.
were a little estranged, or they
Hmm.
saw them once a year. So that whole impact of family loses its
Hmm.
luster
Yeah.
when we have this very fractured society where people don't live in the same state as their grandparents. And like I
Hmm.
personally grew up the child of two only children. Okay,
Hmm.
so I have no
Yeah.
family. The only family
Yeah.
I have is my children and my husband and
Hmm.
his family. And now my daughter got married, so I got a whole new family. So it's exciting. But
Yeah.
so to me, it's like I don't know what cousins are. I don't know what aunts and
Hmm.
uncles are. And so I can see where the whole egg donor thing, they're like, well, but I don't know anybody else I'm related to.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. And interesting, I think, you know, a way I think that has changed the perspective of people being more willing to be egg donors now versus maybe 50 years ago or 20 years ago.
The first
Even.
egg donor cycle was in 1986.
Hmm.
And at the time, 85 and 86, one was in Australia, one was at UCLA.
Hmm.
And they used siblings, is what they were using. So they were using a
Hmm.
sister for the most part or a
Hmm.
cousin. And that's
Yeah.
the way it was really for the first 10 years until it got to the
Hmm.
point where it was more than two or 300 a year. Now it's thousands a
Hmm.
year.
Yeah.
So, that's how it started. And so
Yeah.
hence people were trying to keep the genetics. So now the whole
Yeah.
thing is people want to have ethnicity. Okay. They want to sort of look like the donor. They want to have
Hmm.
characteristics of the donor. But we do a lot of education on the fact that the baby could come out looking like your husband's Aunt Gertrude. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I know you were talking about before when the there was a difference in how egg donors were selected, also by just blind selection versus the ability to select who your egg donors are. And so, which you just kind of talked about just now, but like,
Yes, this is how I
you
like.
know,
That's why I started my business because
hmm.
when I first got in the business, it depended. Now the East Coast, I know everyone thinks, oh, they're so cool and everything happens there. No, it doesn't, because the East Coast actually had big clinics. I'm not going to call them out, but they know who they are. That would the doctor would come in and they'd say, Mrs. Smith, it looks like you're going to really have to go to egg donor, and we found a great donor for you. Oh, great,
Hmm.
yeah, she's your height, she's your weight, she has, brown hair. And so we're going to be starting your cycle soon. Well, what kind of information do I get about her? Oh, no, we've picked her for you. And my
Hmm.
analogy always was, are you going to let the real estate agent pick your house?
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'll take that one. No. And so, the weird thing was in the South, like in where I'm from in Texas, they were a little, this is like Texas has a bad reputation right now, except everyone feels really awful about the floods. But
Yeah.
we were pretty, a cowboy. We were the Wild West. We were mavericks. We were like, oh, no, no, no. We're going to show pictures. You're going to pick your donor, the whole bit. And this was in the late 1990s. And
Mhm.
here we are in California and in New York and Boston. Oh, no, no, no. It's up to us to make the right choice for this. Oh, no, no, no. Let them do it. So we were allowing, when I worked at a clinic,
Uh-huh.
donor intended parents to have the autonomy to pick which donor they wanted. They had
Mhm.
these big binders that had dossiers on the donors, and
Mhm.
they would look through them and find one that they liked. It had pictures, it had all their bio, their school scores, essays. It was like 26 pages long. So they would look at us askance. And my business actually, thank you, New York City, because my business took off because in 2007, when I started, they didn't allow people at any of the IVF clinics in the New York or Boston area to
Mhm.
show pictures of the donor.
Yeah.
And I had a friend, a nurse friend, who was
Mhm.
actually the donor coordinator at a big IVF clinic in New York City. And she said, I have clients that are just going to walk out the door. I'm going to send them to you. And my very first year in business, I did 50 of those matches from that clinic.
Oh, wow.
Yes, I sent her flowers all the time. And because, and the doctors finally, it wasn't just me, but then they started saying other agencies were doing that. And the doctors kind of went, well, okay. So then they decided they would let the psychologist work with the couple to pick. I get that. I get that. You kind of want
Right.
to have a, but the psychologist was still picking your donor and saying, well, I think this is
Uh-huh.
the best one for you based on what you're telling me.
Mhm.
And so we were the outlier. We let people pick. People can have a Zoom call. We're very respectful. We don't want either side to feel bad,
Mhm.
but people can have a Zoom call. They can have a video, both sides.
Mhm.
If the donor says, I'd really like to see what these people look like and
Mhm.
whatever. And so that's kind of how it changed. And I believe that the donors have that autonomy. They get to
Mhm.
pick, the intended parents get to pick who they
Mhm.
want as their genetic stand.
Mhm. So in a way, it's shifting that autonomy from just the donor to both the donor and the intended
Well,
parents.
back in the day, the donor didn't know who she was donating to. In other words, the doctor would
Right.
just say, "Okay, we have a couple for you. Take the birth control pill. We'll call you in 3 weeks." I mean, they also didn't. They were like,
Mhm.
"Okay," and so now we feel like it's going to, the chances of them meeting in the future
Mhm.
are very high. No matter if
Mhm.
they decide to start out anonymous, if they decide to be an identity release, which means
Mhm.
down the road that they can meet each
Mhm.
other or decide their child can't, or they're going to meet early in the process.
Yeah.
Um, everybody has autonomy now, and I think that's the most important thing. And I think the donors enjoy having a mental image to go with them over who
Mhm.
they help.
Mhm. Yeah. Does, having that revealing of who the donor is, does that make the donor population change or shift? That have you noticed that? Because those who want to share more information versus those who didn't, has that shifted the population of those who donate?
Now that's a great question because we talk about it all the time. Because on our intake form, we ask the donor, do you want to be anonymous? Do you want to be identity release, or do you want to be known? And we also explain for the new ones who've never heard of this. We do a
Mhm.
big explanation. There's like a drop down box that explains what each one is.
Mhm.
I've seen it go to about 100% anonymous to maybe 40% anonymous. There's still
Mhm.
people that want to be anonymous. And we have a big database, so I can get all the data out of it that I want. Um, it's usually ethnic groups. So, like Southeast Asian, never want to be known.
Mhm.
Chinese, never want to be known. Okay. I'd say some Southern Europeans that are really like 100% Italian or something, they don't want to be known. But your
Mhm.
average butt American, like, I don't know, I'm a bunch of stuff, English, Irish, Spanish, whatever. They're like, bring it on.
Mhm.
Uh, I would say South American, Latin American heritage. And when I talk about these areas, I'm talking about their heritage, not
Yeah.
that they're from there.
Right.
So, I mean, you can't bring someone over from India to be a
Right.
donor, right? But they
Yeah.
have Indian heritage.
Mhm.
They're no, 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 no. But you have somebody who's just, oh, my family's been in, I don't know, Missouri for 5 generations. They're fine. They're good.
Yeah.
So it depends on the ethnicity.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
the same with the intended parent. Like
Mhm.
you won't find an Indian, Native
Yeah.
American, not Native American Indian, but a native
Southeast
live.
Asian.
Yeah, they were born here or whatever.
Uh-huh.
They don't want to know either.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's an ethnic thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think that stigma still is there, culturally, for a lot of different cultures.
It was really
So
bad when I
yeah.
first started in the business,
Mhm.
and a lot of it was because of where I lived and where I started.
Mhm.
There is a very very large Indian community, and
Mhm.
so you would have people that had arranged marriages. Okay,
Mhm.
they're whatever
Right.
back at home arranged it, even though they lived in the United States,
Right, right.
and
Mhm.
we would find that they were highly highly educated and very
Mhm.
accomplished people. And at the point in time where the women were in their late 30s, early 40s. And
Right.
so, now they've gone to the
Mhm.
matchmaker route because, mom is getting a little handsy.
Yeah, if you don't get married by 25, no, I'm just joking.
Yeah, exactly. We all know, oh, mom is panic, okay?
Yeah.
But you know what would break my heart? It would just break my heart is that they couldn't tell their mother.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't share that with her because they were so worried about the stigma. And they
Yeah.
for sure were never going to tell their mother-in-law.
Oh.
Never, never, never.
God
Yeah.
forbid. God
God
never got
forbid.
it.
Right? But now, because there's such a lack of Southeast Asian donors, and
Right.
then when you get people, and then you get in the woods and you have a country that has 1 billion people in it, and they all want to know, well, what area is the donor from? Oh my God.
Yeah.
You know, and we're from this part and we have to have a
Uh-huh.
donor from that part. I'm like, we're
Yeah.
looking for straws here.
Right.
So, but they tend to, this is very interesting. They tend to pick Hispanic donors.
Hmm.
They pick a Hispanic donors.
Mm-hmm.
I think they feel like the features are more
Yeah.
complementary. The skin
Right.
tone is more complementary, and
Mhm.
combined with their spouse,
Yeah.
and that's opened up a whole new field for them because they don't have such a small selection. Like at any given
Right.
time, we have 3 or 4 Indian donors,
Mm.
but we might have 70 Hispanic.
Mhm. Yeah. That's really interesting. Um, because talking about everyone being related to each other, it's like,
You're spreading the genes around.
spreading the genes around. And, I think like being able to meet the donors, does that like help those who want to meet them and those donors who are willing to meet them, help them kind of feel like for the future of the child that they can later on tell them about their origin story? Or do
I
they not
do.
want to?
I think the people. Okay, so the interesting thing to me is
Mhm.
the highest percentage of people that want to meet the donor. When I say meet, I'm talking Zoom call. I mean,
Yeah,
rarely do they meet
yeah,
in person,
yeah.
but it happens if
Mhm,
they can do that. But um, is same sex couples. They do.
mhm,
Heterosexual couples,
mhm,
it's not a thing.
mhm.
They may want to do identity release. They may even want to have a short chat, like a 5-minute chat, which is all supervised by our staff, where
Uh-huh.
they just want to see your mannerisms and things like that. And single men really they got, and I'm wondering, maybe you should be dating instead of looking. That's just me. Okay, that was politically incorrect. Sorry about that, but I can say that I'm old. So I think that the video thing, now I'd say 50% of the donors already post a video on their profile. And oh my gosh, these girls need to figure out how to do it because they all prop the phone up on the steering wheel of the car and do the video. I'm like, don't you have a GoPro stick or something? But so anyway, it is interesting. And having been in it for so long, it's so interesting how it's kind of morphed into one thing. One of the reasons that
Mhm.
people don't want to do frozen eggs, like donors freeze their eggs and it becomes
Right.
like a sperm bank thing,
Mhm,
is because there's no opportunity to meet your donor or
mhm,
or have a contract with her that
mhm,
your child can know about the donor. So I think that's impacted the egg bank where I do
mhm,
only fresh, like you pick your donor and then she goes to your IVF clinic. Whereas egg banks are like, okay, we'll ship them to
mhm.
you. And so I think it's impacted them because people want to have the option.
Mhm.
Good for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. It's interesting how, things have changed, and so going to the next thing, like malfeasance in, surrogacy, egg donation, I saw this really strange reel. I don't know whether it's really real, but it's this lady going up to buy some Hermes bag for, you know, $15,000 or whatever and saying, "Yeah, I just donated my egg to some guy in China and um so I'm just going to buy this purse now." Like so, how has surrogate egg donation or surrogacy, what are your thoughts on like situations like that? Like to like, you
You know
know,
what? Very few donors get compensated over 10,000. I'd say it's less than 10%. The
mhm,
ones that are tend to be on the extreme. Most donors, okay, most of our donors are between 21 and 27 is kind of the average age. And it looks like any day if you went to your local university and walked around, it looks like those girls, okay?
mhm,
Cute, smart, bright, normal girls,
Mhm.
maybe on the good end of the bell curve, but they're not, oh my gosh, okay.
Mhm.
Then we get ones that are like, whoa, and they know it. I never really knew what an ego was until I met some of these egg donors. Seriously. I'm like, I wish I'd had that kind of ego when I was that age, because gosh, who knows what I could have accomplished.
Right?
Because
Yeah.
we had one, she just retired, and we had her for 3 years, so we were like friends with her and everything. So she had gone to an Ivy League school. She was on a sports team. Now, since she was at an Ivy League school, they do not give scholarships for sports teams. They do other
Mhm.
things, but they don't give
Yeah.
them scholarships, right? But
Right.
she was on a sports team. She went to Ivy League college. She then went to law school at another Ivy League university. And then she
Mhm.
got a job in New York with a white, what they used to call them white shoes law firm. Okay. So she
Mhm.
was making $200,000 a year when at like 26 years old. She
Mhm.
wanted to be an egg donor because she wanted to pay off her student loan.
Mhm.
So her first time that she donated, she said, I want $50,000. And we were like, wow, no one's going to pick you. An hour later, somebody wanted her. I'm seriously. And they were like, oh, we were looking for, and she was cute. She wasn't Miss America. I mean, she was cute. If you were walking down the street, you'd never turn and go, wow, she's beautiful. You just go, oh, okay. I mean,
Yeah.
so she did it from then on. Then the next time she went to 75,000. Then she went to 95,000 and she stayed at 95,000. And why did she stay at 95,000? Because it's all this money goes through an escrow account. We never touch their money. It goes escrow to her bank account. So what she did is she opened up an investment account and had the
Mhm.
money go from there to that. So she never got taxed on it. She paid off her student loans. Then she used her last donation to pay off her condo.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
But where is the
people wanted to pay
yeah.
for it. Okay.
Yeah.
In the back of my mind, I think to myself, okay, so that's all well and dandy. The intended parent said,
Mhm.
we have the money, we're willing to pay for this. And
Yeah.
she's like, I'm willing to go the work to do it, to show up at the
Mhm.
appointments, the pain, the anguish, to be poked and prodded. I'm
Yeah.
being compensated for my genetics, which
Mhm.
produced all my accomplishments, which we all know is like, okay, that was luck of the draw. And but I wonder about the child. So what happens
Mhm.
if the child sits in kindergarten and picks their nose? I mean, I paid $100,000 for you, you know?
Yeah, yeah. What are the expectations or the pressures put on that child, right?
So we
Yeah.
have some really I would say in Los Angeles, we have a few donors and that are exquisitely beautiful. I mean,
Mhm.
exquisite, like, oh my gosh. And they've done some modeling, they're trying to get into acting, and they usually get 25 to 30,000 because people want these beautiful girls. Now, the good news is all the donors, remember this, all of them are having a psychological evaluation and they're having psychological testing. So
Mhm.
people that are, wackadoodle, they aren't making it through the
Yeah.
gauntlet.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And we can tell at the beginning,
Mhm.
if their motivation is, why are you interested in being an egg donor? Now then, if you
Mhm.
have any brains, you're to go, I want to help people, right?
Yeah.
You don't write, I'm desperate for money.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like when you
yeah,
have a job application. Why
yeah,
do you want to work here? Look, I need a job. I'll work anywhere. I mean, you don't
yeah,
put that on there. You go, oh, I'm invested in your company.
yeah. Going back to that, I mean, regarding when the physicians or providers wanted to have more control, was it to, be more in control of health diseases or psychological issues that may, um, be of concern, things like that? Or was it just purely they didn't have the huge amount of egg donors, they just were
It was the
selective or
patriarchy. You want to know the truth? It's the
Mhm,
patriarchy. Okay. And I'm going to say this because back in the day, the vast majority of these physicians were men.
mhm,
And being a reproductive endocrinologist is a very heady job to have. You were you were creating babies. Okay, the
mhm,
embryologist is actually creating the babies, but
mhm,
you're doing this. You're bringing hope to all these people. I love the people I work with. I haven't
mhm,
met one yet that doesn't have an ego. Big, right? And I think it's a big ego thing to say,
mhm,
here's your donor.
mhm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think they wanted control over it because they're all getting genetic screening. They're having psychological screening. They have very
Mm-hmm.
in-depth family backgrounds, like we were talking about. They
Mm-hmm.
don't know who their grandfather was because their dad lost touch with him, 18 years ago
Mm-hmm.
because his parents were divorced. Okay, but we have genetic testing now that tests for
Mm-hmm.
thousands of stuff. So you're not
Mm-hmm.
really worried about grandpa having something because it's going to come
Mm-hmm.
out. You worry more about the social stuff. Did they smoke? Do they have high blood pressure? Do they have diabetes
Mm-hmm.
type 1? We're getting to that, but
Mm-hmm.
so I would say it was patriarchy. They wanted to be in control.
That's interesting. Because I wondered about the reasoning behind that, whether it had anything to do with actual health um, implications.
Well, because they will tell you all the time that they felt that their judgment was better, that they were able
Mhm,
to look. I used to, I stayed friends with him for a long time, but he was very, very adamant that people didn't pick their own.
mhm.
Now in Spain, people don't
Mhm.
pick their own donor.
Yeah.
In Spain, you go in, they let you choose between like 3 bios. Here's 3,
Mhm,
you pick one of these. And
mhm,
and that's it. If you don't like any of those 3, you go to the back of the line.
mhm. Why is that?
Patriarchy. They have a
Hmm.
lot of donors. They don't compensate them like the United States does, but they do
Mhm,
compensate it. Spain is the only place in Europe that they actually have compensated egg donation,
mm,
and so they pay for your bus fare and this and then you get like a pittance. You get a couple $1,000s for your time and
mhm,
effort. They used to do it completely blinded. All they gave you
mm,
was kind of the air color, eye color, that kind of stuff. But
mhm,
over the last few years, they've done it. So basically, you go on a list. Okay, it's Spain. You're the intended parents, and then over here is the egg donors finish their workups. You
mhm,
then they go, okay, here's the next 3 that have your same kind of ethnicity or your same
mhm.
kind of phenotype.
Right. Yeah. And
It's cheaper too.
yeah. What about surrogacy? Just to bring that up too, because I know you were talking about how that is also an ethical question on, someone risking their life to carry another person's child, even though they are compensated. And now compensation is getting so expensive that it's kind of leaving people out of the line,
Yes,
right?
yes. It's very okay. So what's happened in surrogacy? So United States, and then now we do have there's some surrogacy is kind of opened up in Argentina, Colombia, um, I think Belize and Mexico. So there's actually reputable clinics that do a good job in those countries. And Ukraine used to be, but we
Mhm.
don't want to talk about Ukraine. So
Yeah.
otherwise, you can't do it. So anybody that
Yeah.
really wants to do surrogacy has to come to the United States or one of those Latin American countries. So there used to be, we were also the only people that did compensated. Now, Canada does surrogacy, and you can't directly compensate them with money, but you can compensate via we're going to pay your car payment and your
Oh,
house note.
interesting.
Okay. So
Okay.
they still get compensated. It's just different, okay?
Right.
So
Right.
the wait is so long and the
Mhm.
pool is so small of people that want to do it. You have to have a healthy pregnancy. You have to be between like 21, 22, and 35, 36.
Mhm.
You can't have had any underweight babies. You can't have had more than 1 miscarriage. You can't have more than 3 C-sections. I mean, there's just all these
Mhm.
rules and regulations. And so by the time that go down the funnel, out pops, 5 people and 4 of them
Yeah.
have no interest in it. The
Mhm.
compensation has gotten to be out of control, but I am seeing that the pool of intended parents is
Mhm.
shrinking this year because A, people don't want to come to the United States, and B, they're worried about the birthright citizenship issue. And the reason behind that is when let's say you're from China, you come over here, you're using your own egg and sperm, and you make your embryos, and you go back to China, and then you have a surrogate, and she delivers the baby. The baby has US citizenship. They come over, they get the baby, they go to the consulate, and they get dual citizenship for their baby, and they go home with their baby. Now, some people can say that's nefarious, or they're going to try to come back and be a citizen or whatever, but you still can't. The kid had to be 18 years old for they could come back because
Mhm.
the parents could get in. But what happens if they don't have citizenship? So in other words, they say, nope, if you're born here and you're not, and your parents are not legal, then the child has no country and they can't get a passport to go back to China.
Really? That's
Because they are
interesting.
not Chinese. They were not born in China.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a
But
mess. It's a mess. It's
yeah.
happening. It's a mess. And then the same thing happens
Uh-huh.
in Italy. Italy has outlawed surrogacy. And
Uh-huh.
so people were actually pregnant with babies that were going to go to Italy. And Italy will not, they can let them in the country because they have a birth certificate and they have a passport. They have an
Mm-hmm.
American passport, but they can't become Italian citizens. They can't enroll in school because they don't get an Italian, the equivalent of a social security number. So they're children with no country.
But the parents are from Italy,
Doesn't
right?
matter. The whoever runs Italy, the prime minister, whatever,
Uh-huh.
is very anti IVF and everything else, and so she's slowly but surely shut down a lot of stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
so people can't do it. So people that had babies, they can bring them back now, but they can't. They can live in the country, but they can't enroll them in school. They can send them to a private school,
Mm-hmm.
um, but their children don't have any benefits. They don't have insurance.
Oh, wow. That is an ethical question right there. And
That's an ethical
that
question.
is that is like, what are you depriving a child, a human being
You're punishing
from?
the parents for
And
wanting
the
to have that
child.
child.
Yeah. And so, like, because any other parent, if they had a baby of natural means, on their own without having to go through surrogacy, and had the baby outside the country, go back, that baby would be considered Italian or whatever country, right?
It
And be
makes me
able to
think of,
claim.
well, this is not same, but I remember that. So when I was pregnant with my twins, I actually went at 21 weeks out to California to visit a friend. And my
Uh-huh,
doctor had told me, don't do that, but I went anyway because hard
right.
headed. And
Yeah.
I started having premature contractions in California.
Mhm,
And I was like, what am I going to do? And I was scared to go. I mean, I was scared to go to the hospital because I knew, because I was a nurse, that
mhm.
they would put me in the hospital and they could keep me, okay,
Yeah.
because I was having, and they to keep the babies in. So I actually turned around, got on a plane, and flew 3 hours back home. Saw the doctor, and he put me in the hospital, and I stayed there for 8 weeks. So I think about that, and I think, what if that had happened?
Yeah.
What if you came over on holiday? You're only 20
Mhm.
weeks pregnant, and you come from
Yeah.
England, and you end up stuck here, and then your baby is born here, and it doesn't have citizenship.
Mhm.
It's like you're a person with no land, no
Yeah.
country.
Yeah. Which is really so heartless
Now I always
for the.
wonder. So what do they think, the powers that be that decide this is a good idea? What do they think when this happens to their daughter or
Mhm,
their granddaughter that ends up on a trip that, she's to Spain
mhm,
and she's only 20 weeks pregnant, she's still fine to travel. She ends up staying there. What if they said, sorry, we're not going
mhm.
to give you a birth certificate, so you're kind of, how you going to get to home?
Yeah. Or their daughter or granddaughter faces infertility and is not able to have a child, and they don't agree with letting her go through with IVF or surrogacy. Um,
Yeah. We've
yeah.
had people from Germany, because surrogacy, you cannot do surrogacy at all in Germany. And
Mhm,
they have horrible infertility. Okay. Can't carry the baby. And they actually have come to the United States. They've done IVF. They go back home. They sort of fake the pregnancy. And then, like, at 6 months, they have to have a lot of money. At 6 months, they've come back and they basically park here until they
mhm,
have the baby. Because when you have a baby through surrogacy, you do a thing called pre-birth order, and the baby immediately becomes your baby. So
mhm,
the surrogate has no legal claim to it because she's
mhm.
given up her rights before the baby's even been born. So
Right.
basically, your name and your spouse's name go on the birth certificate. So when you
Mhm,
take this to the consulate to get your,
mhm,
oh, I was here, I got stuck, blah, blah, they go, no problem, here it is. And so the birth certificate, everything is in your name. You didn't birth the baby, but it's in
mhm,
your name. And so, hence, what happens is that's how they got around it. They brought the baby home. It was a miracle. We had the baby.
mhm.
I've had that twice, so it's not like it happens every day.
Right, right. Yeah. That's really, um,
Sad.
yeah, really sad to hear because it really brings up thoughts of, and there's so many ethical issues regarding that going on right now in so many other different realms of life, not just with the surrogacy or, um, having, issues with birthright citizenship.
Yeah.
But so I wanted to also, quickly talk
I
about
know.
like your experience with motherhood work and the ideologies that have changed or shifted over the course of your tenure and experience before we close.
I know. I was like, I could talk about egg donation all day. Okay.
I know.
Well, I will say that being a working mother, we all need to give ourselves a big pat on the back, because I think that there's this, um, and this is politically incorrect, but I really get a little angsty when I hear people say, well, being a stay-at-home mom is just as hard. No, it's not. No, it's not. Sorry, it's not. Because I had twins. I went back to work when they were 7 weeks old. I
Mhm.
had to pump breast milk. I was working. I had been on bed rest for months with my twins, so I was really kind of physically not great. Okay.
Mhm.
When I finally, then I moved into infertility, I was paying enormous amounts of money for childcare. And then I spent every other waking moment with my children. When I
Yeah.
started my business, I did all my kids' stuff. My kids my kids were clueless. They just thought mom was always around. But in reality, when I dropped them off at school, then I would work all day, do the afternoon activities, go to soccer, go to swimming, go
Mhm.
to this, go to that. And then when they were doing their homework, I would be back on the computer working again. It's
Yeah.
very difficult.
Mhm.
I think that one of the reasons that when women do this and they go, I'm going to take time off, I think they've done themselves a disservice, because then people don't want it. When I've hired people in the past, and I personally probably have a bias, I'm like, you know what? No, I'm sorry. You took 10 years off. I'm going to hire the person that's still been working. I just feel like if you want to be taken seriously, you'll continue to work, and other people did it. Now that's bad. It's probably bad juju on my part, because it was very difficult. Now, the good news is my kids don't think it was difficult. My kids thought that they had a fabulous childhood and a fabulous life, and that mom was amazing. So, that's worth it right there.
Yeah.
But they've been gone to college, and then now they're out for,
Yeah.
we're on 8 years now.
Mhm.
It's been great. Now it's like, this is what it's like to have like a business and run it and not have kids. And this is great.
Yeah.
So I realize you get so much more accomplished when you don't have that. So you're running on two brain cells when you have those kids. And now I'm
Yes.
like, wow, I got so much done.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's definitely difficult, and I mean, as a working mom myself, I know how it is really hard to juggle and balance it, but it's out of choice, and something that it's based on our personal values, personal um desires to pursue dreams and ambitions of our own, um in addition to parenting.
I wanted all the goodies for my kids. I
Yeah.
seriously did. I
Hmm.
had them. I wanted my children to have music
Yeah.
lessons and dance lessons
Hmm.
and go to summer camp and
Yeah.
be able to be on teams. And my kids were both on travel teams for a while. Oh, that's
Yeah.
horrible. But
Yeah.
and I felt like, I had this one shot to
Mhm.
make a difference in their lives. And
Yeah.
and so that's why I wasn't a diehard career woman. I used to call
Mhm.
myself the reluctant career woman,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I did it out of quote unquote necessity, and I just wanted to clarify, not necessity because we were unable to support our children.
Mhm.
It was because I wanted all that extra stuff. And a lot of
Yeah.
people would say, well, you should have just lived in a different neighborhood, and ethically and morally you did a disservice. Nope. I was like mama to the stars to those kids.
Yeah. 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 And do you think that uh innovate with this so much innovation, ethical complexity, and reproductive technology today, switching gears just a little bit, what gives you hope for the future for reproductive technology and health?
I do feel that there are certain factions of the infertility industrial complex that
Mhm.
are truly dedicated to bringing fertility care away from the upper class, upper middle class, and bring it down to people that are middle class and even working class. In the sense of, it's so expensive now that your average person who's a working class person will never afford it. And so there's places out there that are trying to bring it affordable. just because you are a working class person doesn't mean that you can't have a family. I mean, I think that's horrible.
Yeah.
I don't want fertility to be an elite thing that only people that can afford the price tag should be able to do it. And I see too many people that struggle with surrogacy because that's the only way they're going to have a child of their own. Okay. And then they're like, it costs $150,000. They don't even make anywhere near that a year. But I do see them, their families rally around them, their churches rally around them. I do see it happen, but that's not for everybody. So to me, that's the biggest innovation, is that there's still some pods of reproductive career people that are dedicated to helping all have children. And there is some very cool technology that's coming out that will cut down on the cost. Now, the big private equity fertility companies don't want to hear about that because they don't want anybody messing with that, but it will cut down on cost.
Yeah. And maybe insurance can cover some of these things in the future, hopefully, because
more. They do cover some, but there's 13 states, I think, that are mandated insurance coverage for fertility, and they have guidelines. I too believe in guidelines. You can't have some 50-year-old person saying, I want to do IVF because it's a waste of the money and the drugs. But I think, and most of them have a three strikes and you're out kind of thing. But they don't cover things like egg donation or surrogacy. So I think that if you already know you need that, you should be able to use that benefit, at least the portion that's not compensation for your cycle.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I know we've gone over an hour talking about this thing. It's like so interesting because this is a multifaceted kind of topic to talk about, and we didn't even touch on half the stuff we wanted to, I think.
I'm too chatty.
But I think we had a good discussion because bioethics, it's not about having perfect answers. It's about being brave enough to ask those hard questions and compassionate enough to sit in those, tense areas. And so in a world where we, can design families, extend life, we have to ask, are we doing it with love, justice, and wisdom? And so thank you so much, Mary, for this amazing conversation and sharing your insight and information on all of these very important conversations that do impact a lot of people's lives, future generations. And so I hope that everyone listening can spark hope in their communities and continue in this conversation about justice, love, and wisdom.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mary. Have a great week, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Medicine, Motherhood, Missions. We hope you found inspiration, insight, and a sense of connection in the stories we shared today. If you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners like you. Follow us on Instagram for updates, free downloads, and to join a community of like-minded individuals passionate about making a difference through medicine, motherhood, and mission work. Remember, you're not alone in this journey. Until next time, keep sparking hope, keep healing, keep nurturing, and keep making a difference. This is Johanna signing off from Medicine, Motherhood, Missions. The medical opinions expressed on this podcast are for the informational purposes only and should not be considered as medical advice. Always consult a licensed healthcare provider for personal medical questions or concerns. The views expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the podcast host.